On your mark, get set, go! With the 2024 Paris Olympics round the corner, we are ready to dive into some exciting questions.
Today, we'll be taking a sporting look at the global economy, pulling questions straight from the head. So let's jump right in. Do you anticipate any record-breaking performances that will bring cheer to investors?
So actually, the first half has been a very interesting time for investors because we have moved away from recession fears in the US to a soft landing fear. On top of that, we have seen equity markets perform generally very well. We have seen records being struck by the US S&P 500, but outside of the US as well, you can see the FTSE 100 and even the Chinese stock index and the Hang Seng stock index also did reach highs in May itself before correcting. And then if you look outside the equity market, actually the bond market, Asia dollar spreads are at multi-decade tights. And we have seen quite a few bumper issuances even in the same space itself. And then on the currency front, actually the dollar yen has reached unprecedented levels. So there is a lot of investment hype that is happening in the markets right now. Which sport will you be following for the Olympics, Carmen?
Oh, I love to watch badminton.
I'm a badminton fan myself as well.
Let's together. We saw a tech boom in the first half of 2024. Do you think equities will keep up this pace for the rest of the year? As the leader said, I think this year has been a very good year for equities and largely led by the whole AI team. In fact, now it's in the super cycle. And we are actually really at the beginning of the cycle, and we expect a lot more investments to come in. And that will go in your data center, your software, your hardware, your semiconductors, data center, cloud, etc. So we actually see that this is going to be a very major trend and it will most likely last for maybe 5 to 10 years.
Who is the most famous athlete that you have met?
Oh, I think I met the most famous, must be our local superstar then, Joseph Schooling. What about you?
Well, I've met Schooling as well, but I've also met Shanti, and she's inspired me to run faster.
Will we finally see some rate cuts, and how will that influence the global economy?
Wow, this rate cut story probably is the most anticipated one in the markets right now. As you recall, markets have swung all over the place with respect to the Fed rate cut expectations. When we started the year, markets was looking at almost 7 cuts. They went to almost just 1 cut, and now they're back at 2 cuts. But interestingly, the Fed is not the first mover. You have seen Swiss National Bank, also the European Central Bank, and quite a few others have actually cut rates already. But I think looking ahead to the second half, if we do see this roughly more synchronized monetary policy easing cycle, that should be good for global growth prospects. Because I think we are recognizing that the cumulative rate hikes that we've seen in the last couple of years is exacting a toll on companies and also on households because of the high interest rate burden that they have to bear. So the expectation is the Fed will start to cut rates possibly as early as September, and we probably will get a few more cuts from the likes of the European Central Bank and also the Bank of England, and also the Asian central banks may also want to follow once the Fed leads the way. Did you ever participate in any sports in school, and do you still play it today?
I think I was quite active doing quite a lot of racket games, but I think these days I just go for the leisurely walk at Botanical Gardens.
Well, I did play badminton and also some volleyball and did a bit of canoeing in the school days. These days, I actually try to do a little bit of boxing.
Wow. Focusing on Asian equities, which sector do you expect to end up on the podium? I think still goes back to the same question about the fact that AI is still going to be the biggest trend and it will still continue to drive a lot of the upside for the equity markets. And obviously a lot of the peripheral industries will benefit. We've already seen that happening with the semiconductor. But I think that this whole Asia hub should still see quite a fair bit of growth, especially for tech and tech-related sort of companies. What can we expect next from gold and silver?
It's very much a case of anticipation. When the Fed is going to cut rates, when the central banks are going to resume their gold purchases, and of course, looking at key election risks like for the US in November itself. So I do think that the medium-term prospect for gold still looks fairly constructive. And similarly, if you look at silver as well, it takes its cue from gold, but it has the added benefit of also having industrial use. So we think that short term, yes, there is a little bit of a risk of correction, mainly because of how much it has run up in the first half of this year. But generally, we are constructive over a 6 to 12 month period.
So should I rush out and buy my gold pieces?
Well, Asians always like gold jewellery.
Gold and silver then.
What are your predictions for Singapore and ASEAN? So 2024 is actually shaping out to be a fairly good year in the sense that growth prospects are recovering. We have seen visitor arrivals stabilize. Chinese outbound tourism is slowly coming back. And on top of that, domestic consumption story is generally very resilient in both Singapore and also ASEAN. I think looking ahead, a lot of the risks are mainly external. I have mentioned heightened geopolitical tensions, and in particular, some of the election risks. So there is a lot of uncertainty about how elections would play out in terms of economic policies in 2025. But generally, I would say that for 2024, growth prospects are on track, and we think that it's going to be a very stable year for Asian economies. Outside of the equity market, I think that we have to be careful in areas like the bond market and also the currency markets, mainly because the main focus of investors now, of course, is yield differentials. And as long as the Fed doesn't cut rates, Asian yields differentials are at a disadvantage. I mean, just look at the Japanese yen, for instance. So the play out in terms of the currency markets and some Asian central banks having to smooth out some of this volatility, in the short term, it still remains front and center. Remember to swing at new opportunities, diversify to cover all your bases, and play the long game for big wins.
And as we cross the finish line and go for gold, we wish our Team Singapore athletes all the best at the Games.